pow.
All right, so if you hear pages ruffling, it's just Aaron going through his green book. As I always mentioned or had mentioned before, it's kind of akin to Henry Winkler in The Waterboy. He's got his playbook with all his special plays that Red steals from him.
Yep.
But you still got it. You still got your mojo.
Still got it.
All right, so this is actually part two. I know you've been on the podcast more than 2 times, but we had some technical difficulties out in Venice when I recorded, and unfortunately lost fucking 5 episodes. So I'm in the process of thankfully we still got Laird Hamilton, who is hard to reach, just not because he's unreachable, just because he travels so damn much. But I can get the other ones. And you're in town, so we got this. Yeah. Back-to-back champions.
I was a bit of a sappy bitch in the last one anyway, so I think it was good. It was the universe working in our favor.
You know what? You wanted to talk more about the book, which is what we're going to do today. And of course,
you talk about anything.
I want to go down the rabbit hole on everything. That's what makes these conversations beautiful, brother.
All right.
And if you hear ice rumbling, I'm sorry. I never use ice in my yerba mate, but we've got a new lady in the cafe, and I'm not going to blame anybody or name names, but there's ice in there. So
let's start this thing.
Forgive us for page turning and ice shaking, but it's going to happen during the podcast. You got a fucking brand new book, The Align Method. 5 movement principles. There we go. For a stronger body, sharper mind, and stress-proof life. I love this. This is like your life's work all rolled into one, as many people's first books are. But the stress-proof life, that's the one that stands out to me. Obviously, we know from movement practices how much sharper our mind is, how much more energy we have throughout the day. But the stress-proof life, that's the one that really sticks out, because there's a lot of books on biohacking and just different things that will ultimately bring you some degree of happiness and energy and recovery and improve your life. But the stress-proof, how do we get there?
Yeah, well, it feels as though statistically people are going more towards the direction of anxiety and depression, and even things like suicidal ideation is way up. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but with adolescents in the last 10 years, it's going up dramatically. Obesity, like all this stuff. There's a lot of good things happening in the world as well. And statistics, oftentimes I think it's helpful to not get completely mired in statistic. There's a Mark Twain quote. He said there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. So I think that it's easy to paint the world in any color that you want, depending upon like what kind of book you're trying to write and what you're trying to convince people.
Oh, I think we talked about Civilized to Death by our buddy Chris Ryan.
Yeah.
And he dives right into that. Like if you're looking through one lens, you can say there's never been a greater time. There's never been more wealthy people. And at the same time, there's never been a greater population that goes without food. There's never been more people on the earth who don't have clean water. There's never been this high of obesity. There's never been this high of autoimmune disease. And the list goes on. And obviously, Chris tells a very straight to the point tale that pulls no punches. And in the end, he shows you the way out, which I think is fantastic, because it's not just a doom and gloom book. I highly recommend that for people. Yeah. But let's dive into your book here and talk about how we build the stronger body, sharper mind, and stress-proof life.
Well, so with the stress-proof life, just prefacing with it's not all fire and brimstone. Although I did grow up fairly Catholic, so it's in my DNA to go there. But our environment is such that it chronically folds us into positions that if you didn't know that the person was on their cell phone, there's that really popular photographer, that image various images where he took different photographs and he removed the cell phone from people. They're just looking at their phone and they look super sad, super depressed.
Like someone on a subway or a park bench, folded over.
Laying with their partner in bed, like all that stuff. So culturally, we look at those people are like, oh, cool, like totally normal. They're on their phone, they're doing the thing, like great, awesome. But if you take that phone out, any hunter or gatherer, or you just didn't see the phone there, you'd be like, oh man, like what's wrong? Like how can I help you? And then depression's the number one leading cause of disability worldwide presently. It's supposed to be by 2020, but it happened sooner than that. And so the conversation that I see is lacking in all of the different podcast spheres and such is like the mechanics of depression and the mechanics of anxiety and the mechanics of feeling good and feeling elated and happy and proud and strong. So that's what the book in large part gets into, is how we can start to integrate more effective mechanics into literally every aspect of our life so that we can feel better in any moment.
Yeah, we talked about that before, like kind of how we can reverse engineer, and I don't like the term fake it till you make it, but Bruce Lipton said it, and he's certainly, I don't think he was the first person to say it, but he's certainly somebody I respect. But we know scientifically we can start to reverse symptoms of sadness if we force a smile and hold it.
Yeah.
Right? We know through breathwork practices that if we get excited and our heart starts racing and we start breathing quickly, or there's anxiety, that type of other form of excitement, and we start breathing quickly, if we pay attention to the breath and slow it down, that can reverse engineer the neurochemistry and the hormonal production within the body.
Yep.
Right? So what you're talking about here is all these things, but also posturally.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're in the position of a sad person all day long, that's going to have an impact on your neurochemistry and the way your body physically expresses from the inside out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then within that, I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in assuming that you almost having like postural shame, just like anything, you get yourself wrapped up into this double bind where it's like, oh man, like it's not good to not feel good. It's not good to slouch over, or to feel defeated for a moment, or to feel sad, or to feel like, just fuck it. Like sometimes it's perfectly fine to put yourself into that position. I think feel all the way into the bottom of that so you can actually come out, as opposed to always kind of, we were talking about like ultra running and all that yesterday, of like always kind of having the devil at your tails. I think sometimes I was listening to Graham Hancock, and he was talking about psychedelic experience. He was like, when the snake is opening its mouth and he's looking at you, like you just jump right in that motherfucker. So I think that there's value with that as well, posturally, with like, you don't need to feel shamed to have just be where you're at. So the end goal with the book, and that's how I finished the book, is to let go of all these rules and these regulations of how I'm supposed to be. Because as long as you're living in that how I'm supposed to be, you're always going to be separate from your truest version of yourself. So I don't want it to get stuck in like, okay, you need to be in this upright, what I call the aligned posture all the time. And that would be weird. It's just different colors on the palette. So that would be more of maybe like a blue or like a purple or something kind of fun. But it's really great to color with browns and blacks and grays and all that. Like it's a gray day outside right now. It's not a bad thing. So a lot of these posture books would be like, oh, it's a gray day. Okay, Earth is failing. I was like, no, it's a gray day. It's cool. Get into it.
Yeah, I like that. And since you brought it up with Graham Hancock, there's been plenty of times where if I start to feel sad in a ceremony, I'll just lean over my puke bucket, specifically with ayahuasca or a heroic dose of mushrooms, and I'll just get in that position, and that's what helps me process sadness and pain and let go.
Have you felt that? Because I've felt that consistently, that connection of if I'm in a psychedelic experience, my posture will change. And I'm also like, I've eaten my own placebo with this. So it would of course be like a kind of like in my mind.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. But have you, because I've noticed that if I'm going into what I would consider to be like a dark place in quotations, and I'm kind of like hunching over and going into that position, I'll notice the darkness almost gets faster and deeper. I'm like, oh, I'm really going in. And then I'll have to pull myself out and then maybe take a walk outside or, just kind of come up and catch my breath. And then I'll come back into more of like what feels to be a better state.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. Rogan talked about that a long time ago, having a DMT trip where it was really dark and ominous, and his mind was having a lot of negative thoughts. And then as he shifted into positive thinking, like it had a complete visual change, and the feeling in his body changed immediately, right? So he saw the correspondence between that, and that's something that he refers to, even though he's, I think, fairly against, woo-woo stuff and maybe a little bit less into some of the stuff we're talking about. But I think that you can see that for yourself, and it's palpable. And that's what's cool about the direct experience of the psychedelic experience. Yeah. I'll find myself doing yoga for like the first 30 minutes of any ceremony, just because wherever there's tension in the body, I breathe through it. And it feels like the plants allow me to connect to my body easier and just unwind any tension. And oftentimes I'll feel something that wants to stick around and needs more attention, and then I can dive into that, and there's usually something there, mental, emotional, attached with it. Yeah,
it's interesting. In the book, I mention a specific study from San Francisco University where they took a bunch of students and they had them go into these positions that we're describing right now, and they had them go into, in the book, I call it the mopey postural archetype. So they go into that kind of mopey, hunched over position, and it was easier for them, the students, to access more depressive type memories. And then when they go in an upright, strong, proud, I call aligned position, all of a sudden it's easier for them to access more like feel good memories. So there's some deep primordial connection since you were, I don't know, probably like a single-celled organism, of where your structure changes to a certain position. It's an indication that, okay, we're winning, we're fed, we're sexed, we're happy, we're supported, we're loved. And then there's another position where, oh God, okay, everything contracts up, you shrink, you fold your shoulders, you get ready to fight. And so that's been tapped into our system since the beginning of ever. And that even actually kind of hacks our memories in a sense. It's pretty darn interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this. We have a modern world it affects everyone. Even people in the Amazon are affected by it. It doesn't matter where you're at. You're affected by the modern world.
Yeah.
There's a lot to, and I think I asked you this before. I doubt you've seen it since then. But for those who have seen Joker, the parallels between that movie and what's going on in modern society are fucking there. It was done in a way that was frightening to a lot of people. But I think if you understand that that's how a lot of people experience life. Obviously, not everyone who's taking a grip of pharmaceutical medications for depression and anxiety are going to go out and kill a bunch of people. But there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
I think about a lot of this stuff that we've gotten into from tribe, community, things that have been lost that are hard to retrace our steps to. But it's all internal work. So I think a lot of your book, and obviously I know you cover towards the end the importance of community and things like that.
Yep.
Point out some of the areas that we're fucking up. Obviously you talked about, being in the seated position all day long on our phones, in the car, on the couch, at dinner, wherever we are, we're in a chair for the most part.
I think the biggest thing is repression. Culturally, we are repressed to, like we were at Barton Springs yesterday, and I was so amazed that girls could take their top off. Like, whoa.
That must have happened after I left, because I wouldn't have left.
And then with my friend Micah that's here now, and she's like, yeah, you could take your top off anywhere in Austin. Or in Texas, apparently, which I don't know. It's not like common, but it's like, it's not against the law. I don't know if that's accurate. That's what Micah said.
That's surprising just because
I should cite Micah.
it's still in the Bible Belt. So
yeah, exactly. Maybe it's just Austin. I don't know. Well, regardless, that's beside the point. It's just fascinating to me the amount of shame that we have around this little sector of skin. All of a sudden, there's a discoloration. You're like, oh God, like nobody can see that. We kind of shrink up around that. I think like scoliosis is more common around adolescent girls. So as their chest starts to change shape and blood starts coming out of their body, and men are looking at more as like some prey species, it's like it makes sense that they would perhaps want to hide a little bit in that moment in time. And then structurally, what they do is they kind of wrap their spines up into these positions. And this isn't fact; this is just an idea that I think is interesting. But there's a consistent trend that when they're in that time in their life that it would make sense to hide, posturally their body starts to go in more of a hiding shape. And then in order to unwind that postural pattern, you can do all sorts of NMTs or chiropractic adjustments or rolfing or whatever. But if you don't tap into that person being proud to be who they are in their body, proud every square inch of their skin, there's nothing to shame in your body. It's going to be really hard to stand in an upright position and be proud and open as you walk down the street, especially in the modern culture where it's like, well, I guess any culture. We kind of, I think about, do you ever think about that sometimes being a woman and having, like I do it, when I see a pretty girl walking in the room, I like look her all the way up and down every time.
I do too.
Like without a doubt.
I can't stop. Yeah.
And so there's like a group of males around and one girl walks in, every male I couldn't imagine how that would be like. Anyways,
I think that'd be pretty cool.
I think, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, is it a good thing? I think that's probably a good thing, right?
Well, I think it's embedded. I mean, obviously, what happens after that will tell the tale if it's good or bad. I'm just saying, I think that initial response is a good response, and the only reason it would be perceived as bad is if something bad happened after that previously.
Yeah, and the only thing,
the reason experience that created that pattern of it's not good when people look me up and down,
and the likelihood of something bad happening typically would be a product of repression amongst the males.
Yeah.
So if you're a bunch of ticking time bombs, volcanoes, not the Uzi kind, but the explosive kind, because you're ashamed.
You did a jerking off motion when you said explosive kind.
No, I didn't.
I'm not sure if it was on purpose. It was one pump.
Did I?
It was one pump.
Well, yeah. Body language.
This is reminding me a lot of Jordan Peterson's 12 Steps to a Something Life, but his first step where he talks about the lobsters. How the lobster who wins as a young lobster continues to have the best posture, and the one who fails will get smaller, and even if it grows back to be bigger because it's young, it'll still lose fights later on when it comes to male territorial stuff because it's embraced that wimpy posture as opposed to the big one. I've noticed just for myself, like being 6'3" and you're a tall dude, like you got an inch on me, but walking into rooms or different spaces where I definitely feel like the largest person in the room, I don't necessarily want to like stand up nice and tall and erect with the aligned posture because I just want to fit in. And I've caught this. I mean, this was basically from 16 through, I don't know, 30 or 32. And then, in the last 5 years, I've worked on that to not really give a fuck.
Yeah.
But I find that interesting too.
Dude.
Like it goes both ways. The social embedment of wanting to fit in,
Totally.
So like, nobody else is standing up tall, so I'm not going to be the guy who stands up tall,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I noticed that with regularity, notice parts of my own body that I'm ashamed of, so like my anus. I don't think it's especially attractive, but I'm like, where did I developed that idea. There's some cultures where they worship the phallus, other cultures where it's really cool to have big tits, other cultures, like depending upon your cultural indoctrination, that dictates your perception of your own body, which is very fascinating. The something I wanted to mention in relation to the previous repression stuff is there's a guy called Peter Levine who wrote a book called Awakening the Tiger. I feel like I might have talked to you about this before. Mm-hmm. And in that, he has a really, and I actually describe it in my book as well, a beautiful description of the way that animals in nature, they have trapped, repressed emotions, and then they let them out. So like the moment would be a lion attacks a zebra, for example. All of a sudden, that's like a lot of emotion and a lot of sensation, a lot of fear, and a lot of the zebra is doing everything it can to get out, and eventually it can go into this state of immobilization, where its nervous system essentially just like shuts down because it's like, okay, I've been caught. There's nothing I can do. The safest thing for me to do right now is just shut down. Same thing like a cat and a mouse. You see like a bird fly into a window, it conks out and just lays there and kind of like gathers its bits for a while. And then eventually it goes back into this kind of convulsive, kind of shaking sensation, and it wiggles its feathers out and wiggles its, if it's a zebra, wiggles its legs out and shakes its face over a little bit, and then and then it runs out into nature. And so that moment of shaking itself out, that's like, it looks a lot like weird things you see it maybe like an ecstatic dance thing, or maybe you'd see in some type of breathwork ceremony, or maybe see in some type of like a psychedelic ceremony,
wild country, like the Kundalini practice,
all that. Yeah. So that's what they're doing, is they're trying to jumpstart those systems that have been a part of our physiology since the beginning of ever. So there's all sorts of different tools, which I have some of them in the book, of ways that we can start to tap into that deeper mammalian reptilian self, to let go of some of that trapped trauma, so you can step out just for a moment of this story of, okay, I am Kyle Kingsbury, father of Bear, husband of Tosh, dude at Onnit that does cool shit. Like, this is like, I drive this car, I got this truck, and then I got this. Whoa. You can protect yourself within that story. And then there's a whole other layer that's actually running all the things that kind of caused you to purchase these items and these clothes and arrive you in this position and choose this wife. So we have access to tools to tap us in, to get us underneath our own hood. Yeah,
you can start to pull the curtain back.
Yeah,
it reminds me of trauma release therapy. Have you heard of that? Yeah. Like they purposely put you into a state where you will shake.
Yep.
And it's a simple position. I think you can look it. I'm sure you can just Google it and look it up. It's not hard to do.
Adductor thing, where your legs are splayed open.
Yeah, your legs are splayed open, almost like butterfly position while you lay on your back, and you do like guided breath work and just start letting the legs shake. You like hold them halfway up, so they will start to tremble, and then you allow the tremble to take place. Yeah,
we need that stuff, man. So the where it gets weird is, and weird's actually a good word, so I kind of retract that. Weird is it's an old English word, W-Y-R-D. It means fate. So it means originally meant to be in control of one's fate. So if you're not weird, you're probably just a part of the pack walking themselves off the cliff. So like, it's in your favor to
beat it, Chiefs. Be weird.
It's in your favor to be weird. But culturally, it's pretty darn strange. That probably has a great meaning as well if we look at the etymology of it. to shake yourself out, or to have a face twitch for a second, or like if you're masked, this biological mask, I got that term from Wednesday Martin in the last podcast we did. If that starts to go funny for a second, i.e. like orgasm,
yeah,
that wasn't a very good orgasm face, but nonetheless, like if you go into
that wasn't a very good orgasm sound either.
Well,
I hope that's how you sound.
I usually weep. Mine's
yeah, that wouldn't be weird at all.
I have a weepy orgasm. But if you do that in public, it's pretty darn unacceptable. What is acceptable, though, is if you stuff your face back into your cell phone, if you zip your tie back up and get it tight and organize yourself, if you like just get all your lines right. Okay, I'm back. Kyle's back.
It's like Bill Burr in his latest comedy special, and he's like, no, that English rising up. Let's stuff it back down. And he pushes it back down. It's just, he rides it a little high.
Yeah. So it's an interesting, and we've talked about this before as well, that the if you are willing to put yourself into one of those like natural biological states in public, it's going to be very strange. But in a sense, you're kind of like a revolutionary or a pioneer, and that you're saying like, listen, this is what my biology is doing. I'm gonna do it, and I'm just gonna. This is if you guys have judgment or something like that, that's fine. But what that potentially, and it doesn't need to be that you're shaking out weird. It could just be like you're being honest with somebody. You're like speaking your truth. But by you doing that, all of a sudden, at first it's painful and scary, but then eventually it opens the door for everybody else to start doing the same thing. We were at that dinner thing that I threw in LA, whatever that was, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or something like that. And in the beginning, I had everybody circle up, and there's probably like, I don't know how many, like almost 30 of us, fucking Chuck Liddell, various amazing human beings in the lineup of folks. And we're having everybody breathe into each other's ribs, having eye contact, looking at each other. Then we start breathing and huffing and puffing. And then on the way out, we kind of slowly led people into screaming as loud as they possibly could. So
while hitting the forward fold and still holding each other's ribs.
Holding each other's ribs, man. And, if we just jumped straight to that, like people are taking their, hey, welcome, like it wouldn't work out so well.
Yeah.
But gradually we move them into that. And then the other side of that, us just staring at each other, screaming like animals, is really deep connection.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, like there's no question for not everyone joined in on the screaming. Some people kept their mouths shut.
I can't believe that. I thought everybody was screaming. I wish you didn't tell me.
I was paying attention because I wanted to know. I mean, there was a lot of people there that I respect. A lot of people who are, very high up in whatever field that they're doing. Like Mark Sisson's there. There's a lot of. I mean, we could name drop all day long, but there were some fucking awesome people.
I name dropped Chuck Liddell intentionally because he was my childhood hero. He was like I played video games. I was Chuck. So then when I'm screaming with Chuck, I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I was very excited about that.
Chuck's phenomenal, and same with his wife, Heidi. But, like, I think one of those things is, sure, it's weird. There's no doubt. It's weird. But when it's done, I felt legitimately high.
Yep.
I felt high. I had energy. And I told you beforehand that, like, it's funny because, like, I don't know how you coaxed everyone into going. You worked some magic. Like, you were able to get everybody to show up. And quite a few awesome people were there. Everyone was awesome that went there. But I was super tired. I had just done a really hard workout at Gabby and Laird's place, more name drops, and some podcasts. And I was fucking spent. It was like a whole week of doing this in California. And I just really wanted to sleep. But I was like, nah, let me show up for a little bit. I'll drive my own car. And if I need to, I can leave early. After that, I had a fucking second wind.
Yeah, man.
Right? When did 3 minutes in the ice bath at 32 degrees. Like I was fucking balling. I was ready to go.
Central governor theory.
Yeah. It was phenomenal. Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the key ingredients when you think of, people like Wim Hof, where they say feeling is believing, right? Like these practices that you mentioned in the book, from breath work to body position to all these things, they make you feel different very quickly.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, in 10 years, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, right now you'll get it.
Yeah. Another interesting tool that we have a whole chapter in the book about sight, the way that you can start to leverage sight as a tool for your own fitness and wellness. I had Andrew Huberman, who you've had on here, I think multiple times.
Yeah, a couple times now.
He's like, in the world of, I don't know what that world is even called. Vision biology therapy. Do you know what the term is? What's his title?
I don't know. Well, he is, a neuroscientist, and he's got the human lab at Stanford, and he's studying all sorts of shit. I mean, his studies it's funny. I know where you're going to go with this, and I'll circle back to it in a second, but I haven't even brought up the visual stuff that he's working on. He's working on curing blindness.
Wow.
Like he's really deep in that field. Yeah. We've just been talking about things. I don't know how many blind people listen to the show. Obviously, podcasts are good for blind people.
Yeah.
But we talk about some of the studies that he's doing where he's looking at people with anything from mild anxiety to PTSD, and he's working on different VR programs, hypnosis, breath work, and he's studying all that and how that changes brain chemistry and allows you to sleep better and let go of negative thinking and all that shit. Yeah. So he's dialed the fuck in. Yeah, I'm on board.
He's my hero in that world. I'm looking for him. I'm going to do a podcast with him this month, actually. I'm just like, I'm in awe of the depth that he's going in that direction. I'm very grateful that, a large part of that chapter was based off of his work. And so he was kind enough to review the chapter and kind of give it like all right, this is cool. This is great. But within that, we think of fitness as muscle ups, pistol squats, bicep curls, tricep kickbacks. Like that's like my previous concept of fitness. But that fitness, like right now we're doing fitness. This conversation is an expression of fitness. The way that you're sitting in that chair, the way that you're breathing, the way that you're looking or not looking at me or looking out the window, all of that has one-to-one effects on your hormonal system, on your whole physiology. So you can start to tap in to, as you're working out, like perhaps something that you could do, you could start stacking layers and say, maybe I'll work out outside. That way I can look out into the trees and out into the distance. As I'm working, I'm doing a meeting. Okay, let's make sure that we do the meeting. Ideally, let's just walk outside. There's a whole chapter about the value of walking. But if walking isn't an option, let's at least like open a window. Ideally, let's open the window all the way if that's possible, so we can let that full spectrum of light come in, and we're not just blocking out half of the spectrum with the window. So we can start to stack those variables and just leveraging sight. Realize that every time you're looking down at your phone, you're literally putting yourself into more of like an executive function, fight, flight, like get up and at 'em state. So if you come back and you're stressed out and your way of unwinding is looking at Instagram updates, you're actually just digging yourself deeper into that stress pit. And so what you really need to do is you need to put the fucking phone down and look up at some trees, look up at a cloud, start to, you could go blurring your vision is another really nice option. So if you're in that myopic, close, staring down at the, Wednesday Martin said another thing. She said, it's like you're looking at you're trying to shoot the Instagram post in between the eyes. So you're like reptilian mammalian self. It's like, okay, I'm focusing in, I'm pulling the bow back. All my attention is in that point. The opposite of what you could do is blur your vision. So if you're a person that's really focused, really stressed, really type A personality, play with just kind of letting your eyes kind of go glazing. Let yourself go into more of that blur, and then emphasize that breath out as you're doing that. It's an immediate tool that you have access to literally right now as you're driving your car. Well, maybe don't blur your vision during that, but emphasize that breath out as you're driving your car. If you're feeling a little stressed before a meeting, whatever it may be, start to leverage sight, look out into the distance. And then another thing that I'm starting to get into is leveraging breath. But we always have this whole palette of tools that we can access for our fitness and for our wellness and our well-being. But typically what we think of as fitness, wellness, well-being is, wind sprints and more, time on the treadmill. It's so much bigger than that. Yeah,
for sure. When you first talked to me about that, the nearsightedness, obviously it's an issue, but also just our focal point. Like if we were foraging and we found like an edible mushroom or some nettle that we were going to use for harvest, we'd say, oh, okay, we'd recognize it and we'd pick it, but we wouldn't stay fixed on it.
Yep,
right? Exactly. So like the only things we stay fixed on are predators or really shitty situations where we have to be very mindful of that. So if we fixate on something near to us, like a hawk, we're
or a shark.
Yeah, like we're hopefully we are hunting that thing that we're fixed on, and it's not the opposite effect. But you can see why that would dial us in and crank up all that neurochemistry in a way that can be helpful at times. But if it's done chronically, which it is now, it's a big issue.
Yep.
And what's cool about that expansiveness, like, I mean, some of my best ceremonies have been on a mountain in Sedona, where I can just see for fucking miles in all directions, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I just think about that, like how important that is for me. And, they have, obviously we kind of laugh at the forest bathing term, that they're studying now in Japan. But I think Aubrey talked about it in his book, and it's in the book Unplugged with Dr. Andy Galpin and Brian McKenzie, is that in Japan, where they have a very high suicide rate, if they went for a 30-minute walk in nature 3 days a week, and I think I'm getting that right, it might be 5 days a week, but if they went for this 30-minute walk in nature, they had a 60% reduction in all-cause depression.
Yep.
But if they went for that same walk in the city, they wouldn't have the same results. Now, Austin's usually always green. It rains a lot. It's gorgeous. And I do this 1 mile walk around Onnit multiple times a day. Sometimes I'll walk 10 miles in a fucking day, listening to Audible or meditating. And what's cool is, even though there's cars and exhaust and people honking and construction and all that kind of shit, there's a lot of trees, and there's always the sky.
Always.
There's always clouds. Even on a blue, sunshiny day, there's some clouds I can stare out at, right? And that to me, now that you mention all this, I think is really what shifts my mood. Moving is great. And a lot of times, and I've mentioned this, I know a ton of times before, if people have trouble sitting still, that's what yoga was invented for. The physical practice of yoga is one of 4 practices in order to allow us to be still, right? And I think walking is tremendous. It's tremendous for me, but it's also because I'm not walking and looking at my fucking cell phone. Even if I'm listening to Audible, that's in my fanny pack, and I'm staring off into space, looking at different things, taking it all in, watching birds, looking at crickets coming in. We had we had like a cricket migration where they come in and mate all the way from Austin to New Braunfels. And it's awesome. They're fucking everywhere. There's just like hundreds of thousands of them all over, singing during the day. Like, they're inescapable. But it's cool because you just feel connected to nature, you know?
You know what happens to grasshoppers? I know that you know this. The grasshoppers can turn to locusts. There's specific species, but unless they start off as grasshoppers, and then when food becomes short, they come from, say, like an agricultural age like this one, where you have an abundance of food. If all of a sudden that gets short and they get put close up to each other and they start rubbing each other and perturbating each other's sides for, I think it's like 5 hours. I saw a YouTube video. Perturbating.
Oh, explain it to me.
Perturbating?
So, over my head.
Oh, it's just like agitating.
Oh, okay.
You know?
All right.
Yeah. Imagine like if I'm like tickling your balls.
That would be pleasant. But if there was 100 people in a room doing that, I might get freaked out.
Perturbating.
Okay.
Smacking them around. Anyways, probably have to cut that part out.
No edits. No fucking edits. So locusts.
Locusts. So if you start perturbating, if you start having to rub up against each other and be in those close confined states, stacked up on top of each other, I'm kind of describing a city. All of a sudden, their physiology completely transforms, and the shape of their head changes, and their thorax, and they become cannibalistic, and they just become these like jerks. And then you see a similar thing, not necessarily that people become locusts, but you see when people go into cities, they start talking a lot faster. And when you're walking down the street, it becomes a lot easier to walk over that homeless person, or just, someone drops their thing, or someone's maybe getting mugged, or something's weird's happening. You're like, oh, somebody else will take care of it. In a small town, it doesn't work like that. In a small town, it's like, I'm looking out for you, you're looking out for me. And it's just interesting. A quote from Einstein that I mentioned to you before is the field contains and regulates the particle. So it's like we think that we're these isolated, separate particles, but in reality, we are the field. There's no separation. So you can start to tap in. Another chapter section in the book is being able to tap into your environment, augment your environment, because you are your environment. It's not, I'm going to get, I'm going to put my desk near the window, or I'm going to start spending more time sitting on the ground. I'm going to get some floor cushions or a comfy rug or whatever, because it's like, it might be good for my hips. It's like, no, it's going to change your whole perspective on the world, man. If you start to shift your posture and shift your, the way that you look, the way that the sounds that you hear in your environment, the amount of contact that you have in your day to day, I'm kind of just pointing out different specific sections in there. It doesn't just do the what is it? The sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Your environment shapes you. Those specific points, the specific variables, they aggregate into much more than the individual to start. That was kind of a rambling thought. I was excited about the grasshoppers.
Yeah, I was thinking about grasshoppers. Was that in Civilized to Death, or was that in?
It's all over the place, but he did mention him in Civilized to Death. Yeah.
And then another great book, Sacred Economics. You turned me on to that.
Charles Eisenstein.
Highly recommend it. We'll link to it in the show notes. I'm about halfway through it. It's one of my fucking favorites, and I always love that because like you're one of my closest friends, and I appreciate the fuck out of you. But when somebody else who's on the path of learning and growth says, you have to read this book, I'm like, fuck yes, right now, purchased, you know? And it's insane. But what reminded me of that book was, as you were talking about this ideation we have around our separateness from nature.
Yep.
We're not, you know, like that, even goes into, it's fucking everywhere. It's in every system. It's in our economy. It's in all this shit, but it's also in Western medicine. And that's the big thing that grossed me out in listening to David Sinclair on Rogan's, who's the lifespan guy. And I'm highly appreciative of people like him in the world, because they're going to figure out certain things that have to do with extending lifespan and longevity. That's all great. But it's the idea that a lot of these scientists have that we can beat nature, we can master it, we can figure it out. And it's the same thing, you know, from parts of the tech sector where we're going to be able to take our consciousness and put it in a machine. It's like, fucking die, transition to the next thing. You're not going anywhere. Let your fucking consciousness go somewhere else for a while and experience that. How fucking boring would it be to hang out in some fucking computer-generated virtual reality, or even if you could go into some type of robot and hang out here on Earth. If you were immortal, it would suck.
Yeah.
It'd be the shittiest. That would be hell. Yeah. You'd watch everyone you love die.
I think it's interesting that those belief systems from the scientific model that we're entrenched in are pretty darn acceptable and pretty cool. But the idea of someone having some experience with an entity or some voice, you know, the Greek daemon, like the inner voice inside of you speaking to you, guiding your life, is like, that person needs to be locked up.
Yeah. People even fucking freak out about intuition. They're like, what the fuck is intuition? You know, like, it's like, well, yeah, maybe you don't get it if you have been closed off from that part of you.
Yeah.
But it does exist.
Yeah.
Right.
With the Charles Eisenstein stuff, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's a topic that I want to understand deeper. But I think it's really interesting the way that how entrenched we are in our financial system, you know. And it's like, I was doing a interview with Paul Chek, and he was talking about how, like, you can't get away from Christianity. Like, it's so deeply entrenched in your culture. It's entrenched in the, you know, just everything from the drop. Like, you can say like, oh, I'm this or that, but nonetheless, like, the culture that you're raised in, the cup that you're in is based off of that. You know, and in our financial system, it's a similar thing. Like, since you were a little, you know, pre-fetus, like, you've been in this financial system where we're rewarded for presently, for the most part. It can shift, and I think it is shifting in small ways, but you're rewarded for destroying resources, for destroying natural resources. You know, so I was having this metaphor pop up from the other day of, like, you know, if someone came to your house, a neighbor came over and was like, hey, dude, like, your yard is a little shabby. I'd like to kind of spruce it up, you know, and so here's what I want to do. I want you to lend me $10,000. I'm going to go out. I'm going to buy these, you know, rocks and get new grass and trees and all this stuff. I'm going to fix it up. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to increase the value of your house by probably $60,000. So just give me this $10,000, fix it up. It's only going to take me a month, and it's going to hook up the whole neighborhood. You'd be like, yes, like, amazing. You're like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you care about the neighborhood. I love that. Let's do that. Culturally, if you do that to the bank and you say, hey, I'm going to go to the bank, like, hey, man, I need, you know, $100,000. I want to take care of these woods. You know, I got this plot of land. I want to just make it beautiful. I want to, you know, introduce new fungus, mycoforestry is a thing I recently learned about. You know, I want to make it great. I want to help the earth. The bank's like, I don't give a shit unless you can pay me back, you know, 20% on top of that, or whatever it is. You know, so the analogy with the person, if they came to your house, your neighbor comes over and says, hey, listen, I want to borrow $10,000 and I want to dig this big nasty hole in your front yard. I want to destroy your whole fucking front yard. And we're going to get some of this rock substance that we've deemed valuable as a culture. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to sell it. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to pay you $14,000 in a month. Do you want to do it? You'd be like, no, you're going to fucking ruin my yard. You're going to ruin the neighborhood. What are you talking about? But the present banking system is set up that it's like, yeah, cool, sweet. I'll get that extra $4,000. Okay, cool, we're in.
Yeah.
So if we can somehow start to shift the model in such a way that we praise each other for helping each other and helping ourselves and taking care of the forest and taking care of the roads and picking up trash just because, like if there was some way to reward that person that walks down the street and just picks up trash, but presently that doesn't exist. So we walk over the trash and we go make money.
Yeah, I think about that. And obviously I'm only halfway through the book, and the book is a lot around gift economy. And that's something that I first experienced at Burning Man. And for people who haven't been, I understand, like, tired of the Burning Man stories, I get it. But to be in a place where there is no money exchange, and if you ask for something, you're highly likely to get it. Maybe not from the first person you ask, but somebody will deliver what you want or need. And in return, you either give them back something of yours or you pay the gift to somebody else. But they know in the act of giving that is reciprocal. That on the playa, the gift will be returned to them in one form or another. And that's really cool, because that is, as Chris gets through in Civilized to Death, that is the hunter-gatherer way. It is the idea that you will trade and you'll give things and you just move that around. It's in full circle. You're always giving, and in the turn of that, you're always receiving. I don't know how you quantify that. I think in a way it's almost, I don't know, unless you're doing it depends what the intention is. If you're doing it for virtue signaling to say like, hey, I'm the fucking great guy, I'm the one that cleans up this neighborhood, then you can be an asshole about it. But
i.e. me on a podcast.
Yeah, we did talk about that in the last one. You clean up Santa Monica Beach
3 pieces a day.
And I clean up my daily walk. Not every day, but every now and then I'll get some gloves and we'll go pick up trash around the neighborhood. I think it's almost better though. It's not better because of the way, there's no reward for doing good things, but if you can create that internal reward, then it is good, right? So like, I think with regard to picking up trash and being a good person and being kind and leading with your heart and all that shit, the reward is in and of itself, right? And that's the idea behind the gift giving. It's not with the intention of, well, I know I'm going to get mine coming back to me and it's going to be at least as good, if not better. If you take that out of it and it's just the act of the gift itself, I want to give this gift to you. If that's the only thing you're going for in that exchange, that's where there's the fucking real medicine, right? And the same thing goes for being kind. It's not like, well, if I'm kind to Aaron, then at least one other person will be kind to me. That's the way the world works. Well, not necessarily, right? Yeah. But if I want to be kind just for the sake of being kind, that's a really fucking good quality to have.
But the thing is that is the way the world works. Like if you, your relationships is the most valuable form of currency that you have access to. Like we've been duped into believing that financial currency is the thing, but that shit's fluctuating. Like at any day we could get the memo from Trump or whoever, like, oh, sorry, American currency just dropped like 3/4. So that money that you thought was worth this much, now it's 1/4 of that. And we don't know what direction it's going from here. So if you have been burning your relationships for the last 25 years in the name of creating currency, and then all of a sudden you're setting yourself up for that, like you'd have to have some degree of underlying subconscious anxiety if you're putting all of your marbles into that, because inherently it has no legs, it has no support. But relationships, no matter what the fuck happens to society, if you have relationships and people really care about Kyle Kingsbury because he helps the tribe, no matter what, you're good. And also, by the way, you'll get more currency. Whatever the model that we're operating in, you'll be abundant in that. So if currency shifts to all of a sudden, Mountain Valley bottles are like that's gold. Kyle Kingsbury have more Mountain Valley spring water bottles, because people want to give him those bottles because they want him around. But I think that we're duped. We don't really get taught about relationships, and do we get taught about relationships in school? Is that even a thing?
I don't think so.
Relationship building? So.
Even
that's like the thing, man. That's it. That's one of its. There's a lot of its.
Yeah, there's a lot of its.
Yeah.
There's a lot of its for sure.
We need a class.
I think we were on environment. We talk about how you model a perfect environment. And I know I've mentioned this before, but we got, 100 square feet of MMA mats in our living room.
Oh yeah.
And we've had them since we lived in my mom's garage, which was the first time I met you. You came and stayed down with us for a couple of days while you were moving to Santa Monica. And that's something I may end up having to replace those at some point, but they will be in every house I have until the day I die.
Yep.
Because it's an invitation for us to get on the floor. It's an invitation for us to wrestle or do jujitsu or do yoga or just fucking hang out and stretch. We play all of our board games there. We play Uno with Bear. We play Rumi Cube. It's always on that fucking mat. And it's because it's right there in the center of the living room, right? It's accessible. It's convenient. And I walk across it wherever I go. If I'm going to bed, I walk across the mat.
Yeah.
If I'm going to the kitchen, I walk back across the mat. The mat is always there. It's the centerpiece of the whole fucking house. So it's so easy to access that.
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting, your feet have 7,000 nerve endings distributing information of what's happening in your environment all the time. So like reflexology and all that stuff. It's like it's good for you to have that adaptation and that stimulation. So being barefoot and having various different contoured surfaces in your environment is a really big deal for creativity, for health, longevity. So it's a good idea to start doing that. The other thing is making it so that your visual field has those health-inducing variables present all the time. So throwing a pull-up bar in between a doorway is a really big deal. Every time you walk through the door, you do a little woo, you do a little swing thing. Now all of a sudden you're mobilizing your shoulders, you're opening up lung capacity, you're even mobilizing the tissue around your heart. Like your organs aren't just these isolated things that live in a vacuum. It's like your movement is massaging your organs. That's what contralateral motion is. Walking. As you're walking, you can think of yourself, it's almost like you're twisting out the rag that is your internal viscera. So if you have organ issues, maybe go for a walk, and also along with that, maybe do all the other things. Pay attention to your breath, look out into the distance, pay attention to soothing sounds. It's going to calm your autonomic nervous system. And so you can go into more of like a rest, digest, heal type place. With putting something like mats on the floor is genius. If you have a family and you give a shit about yourself or your kids or your, anybody that comes into your home, by inviting them to make that journey down to the ground, you're tapping them back into their primordial roots. That's where you've come from since the beginning of ever. And so since chairs, like Egyptian times, we have like royalty sitting in chairs and, it's diamonds and gold and it's like the disease of affluenza. You go into that position where you're sitting hunched up in the chair, you're standing over other people while all the peasants are sitting on the ground, mobilizing their hips and their knees and their ankles and circulating fluids and moving lymphatic fluid and, doing all the things that naturally heals their body. That king, i.e. now all of us, we're aspiring to be those kings sitting up in the Range Rover or the chair all day at the office in front of the fancy computer. They get sick. So the key is to start to change your visual field. You need to put those things in front of you that causes lubricates your trip down to the floor. It's not this thing where I have to sit in my car, drive to the gym in order to do some hip stretching. If you just put that mat down there, all of a sudden you're going to go through that whole range of motion on a regular basis. And in the book, I recommend 30 minutes a day, which is low, very low. But nonetheless, if you just do that 30 minutes a day, it's going to be, it's going to potentially, for one thing, it's going to prevent you from having fall risk as an elderly person, which is the number one leading reason that elderly need assisted living. So if you give a shit about your kids even not wanting for you to be a burden when you're 85 years old because you can't get up off of the ground, now all of a sudden you have to reach out. You have to have a red button or a cell phone nearby because daddy fell down and he can't get up.
Life alert.
Life alert.
Yeah.
That's real shit. And it's like me thinking about my parents in that situation, it literally brings a tear to my eye. I had that moment recently where I was like, oh yeah, you got on the floor, mobilize your hips, all that stuff. And then in another interview, I was talking about really visualizing my mom, going down to the ground and not being able to get up. It's like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
And while we have access to our legs and to our hips and to, all of our parts, we need to use them or we will lose them. And what culture has done is it's sold us the opportunity to outsource all of our movement. And then so we're paying for movement essentially, that's the model. And then eventually we lose that, then we're dependent on that. And then a small group of people get wealthy, and then everyone else gets sick.
Damn. What else we got in here? What else we got in the green book? That was awesome. That was damn awesome.
Yeah, I don't know, all sorts of good shit, man. Touch is a really important thing.
Yeah, that was something we talked about before. I think at the party was I was talking to Amanda Bucci, who's
Amanda Bucci. I love saying her name like that.
She's she's got quite a following on Instagram. A lot of what she does, she teaches people how to grow their Instagram following and build businesses through social media. And she's just, that's what she does. That's not who she is, obviously. She's fucking amazing. She's an amazing person. I was totally drawn to her. I really enjoyed talking with her. And totally forgot where I was going with this.
Touch.
We just talked touch. Yeah. So I was talking about this post where at one of the events that Aubrey threw in Santa Monica, I was pretty spent, and I'm just kind of sitting on a bench, and you just come up behind me and just start digging your elbow in.
Oh, we have a picture of that.
We have a picture.
I posted an image on the Instagram about
on
monkeys
the gram.
grooming each other. That's what we
talked
do.
About that grooming and the need for physical touch, and like I'm just sitting there, eyes closed, like melting into your elbow.
Yeah,
and it's so much more critical than just scheduling a massage once a month. I think about that too. I think about families that really don't have that. I think of, I've certainly mentioned, some of the ways that, some of the things I didn't appreciate about my childhood on different podcasts that I've worked through in plant medicines, but there was a lot that I did appreciate. And one of those things was that both my parents were very loving, and they showed that affection through touch. My dad would wrestle, he'd play. When I had growing pains, he'd massage my legs. He'd give me a massage anyways, just like pre-football, post-football games, things like that.
Yeah.
And my mom's just a big love ball. She would always hold us, and we'd snuggle while we watch movies. And, if we're at the theaters, we lift the arm up and just cuddle in next to each other to watch. So I always had that. And I think for me, it's just something that I kind of knew. It's almost like this is water. Like I hadn't paid attention to it because I was unaware, but then I would recognize that as I grew older. Like I'd want to hug somebody and they'd kind of feel like, that was weird. And it's like, is it? It's not weird to me, but it's weird for a lot of people who don't have that.
Yeah.
Right. But talk about that, because that's like a huge piece. And I know, I've mentioned The 5 Love Languages is a great book. What people misunderstand about that book is that you're primarily trying to find out what your top 3 love languages are, whether that's touch, gift giving, acts of service, quality time, and whatever the 5th one is.
Blowjobs.
Yeah, but you think about those things and you're like, oh, I'm a touch person, or oh, I'm quality time, or I'm definitely acts of service. I want, you show me love by doing the laundry and vacuuming the house and doing the dishes. It's all a sliding scale, right? And that doesn't nullify anyone from having touch as a love language. And I wonder if people who say have acts of service, if that was just a program, like they saw their dad show their mom love by doing yard work and doing the dishes and making dinner each night. So that's how daddy showed mommy love. And now that's the way I receive love, right? And I wonder if people have touch in the number 5 position because they didn't receive it when they were a kid.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know too many people that do have touch in the number 5 position when I ask.
Tasha's number 1, and she didn't have it. Her number 1's touch, and she definitely didn't get that kind of affection.
I think most people at an organism level, I think touch would be, at least top 2. I think if you have some, but I don't know. I haven't asked enough people, but most of the people that I hang out with, and like, oh, touch. But I'm like in a touch culture, so it's the bubbles that I live in are different. But yeah, man. Touch is there's like the Romanian orphanages is an interesting example of when kids. This happened in the late '80s. There was an excess of Romanian orphans. There was like the dictator was doing all sorts of weird stuff. They were causing. They were saying you can't use birth control, and they wanted to create as many humans as possible. And then it all fell apart. And then we have all these kids, and during that time, there weren't enough caretakers to contact the babies, and they just literally stopped growing. And they have all these emotional disorders growing up, and it's like not getting that signal. Touch is essentially the primary signal that you're cared for, you're loved, you're supported, you're accepted. If someone gets me a new watch or something like that, it's like, cool. Like I feel that. Like I guess you got me a gift. It feels good. You care for it, you paid for it. But if you don't give me the watch and give me a hug, it's gonna feel weird. and weird not in like the control of your own fate way, but weird kind of like, oh, interesting. Like, what is this? Some kind of transaction, but touch, it's like, no, like I'm exchanging you. Like I'm breathing you in, in Hawaii, they call haoles or white people. So I moved out there when I was 18, lived out there for like 5 years. And so I was a minority in Hawaii, which is exciting, just as like a learning experience. And so I was a haole, and haole means without breath. And so when the white man came to Hawaii, they, instead of breathing each other in, like I'm describing now, so they'd go up and do like this little like Eskimo kiss where they breathe each other's air in, exchange each other. I am you, you are me. There's no separation. Like, come in. So we have that connection. That's an indication of full acceptance. And getting a gift, you're not breathing somebody in with a gift. Yeah. and so that's that sensation of being the primary thing that most people, maybe just me, have fear of is not being loved and not being enough. So for you to reach out and hold somebody, it's like a pretty strong indication that, no, I do love you, I do care, like you are enough. It's really important.
Fuck yeah, brother. Anything else you want to toss in there?
I don't know, man. Buy the book. There's that.
Get it. The Align Method. It's available right now on pre-sale. It launches when?
December 24th. So if you pre-order it now, whenever this goes out, let's say today is December something. I don't know. And it's obviously evergreen, but comes out December 24th. So Amazon says it arrives on December 24th. So it could be a Christmas gift. And then along with that, there's the Align Method online program, which is a 7-day free trial. That's at alignpodcast.com/alignmethod. But
that's a lot of words for a link. It's a good thing we'll have that in the show notes so you can just one click it.
Good point. Just get the book. That's the most important thing. From there, everything comes together. So thealignbook.com has that's for the pre-order.
Okay.
And then if this is after December 24th, get the Align Method at any bookstore or Amazon or anywhere you get your books. It's going to be all over the places.
Dope, brother. I love you so much, man.
I love
awesome
you.
Having you back.
Thank you, brother. We're going to jump over and quote on the Align podcast now.
That's right.
And make
sure you click subscribe to my boys' podcast, and you'll hear me on there for around 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. How many times I've been on too.
They're always my favorite.
Awesome.
Right. Thank you, brother.